Most people think working security in a closed hospital is about catching intruders. It's not. It's mostly about fighting the crushing boredom. The wing was empty. No patients, no staff, just rows of plastic-wrapped equipment and the smell of stale floor wax. To pass the time, I'd spend my shifts on my phone. But the thick concrete walls were a graveyard for cell service. There was only one spot in the entire north wing where I could get a signal, a small alcove right outside room 413. One night, around 2 a.m., my 5G dropped completely. I opened my Wi-Fi settings to see if the hospital's guest network was reaching this far. That's when I saw it. A network called Room 413 Patient Monitor. It had a full signal. It was weird because the room was empty and the power to the medical equipment had been cut months ago. Curiosity got the better of me. I tapped it. No password. I connected instantly. The second I joined, my phone vibrated. An airdrop request. The sender was just unknown. I should have declined it. I should have turned off my phone and finished my rounds. I hit accept. It was a photo, a high-resolution shot of the hallway I was standing in. I could see the water fountain, the fire extinguisher, and me. I was in the photo, looking down at my phone. It was taken from directly behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped my flashlight. The hallway was empty. The air was cold, but the silence was absolute. "Funny," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Real funny, guys. I thought maybe the guards from the South Wing were playing a prank with a hidden camera." I started walking away, heading back toward the elevators. Buzz. Another photo. This one was taken from the end of the hallway I was walking toward. It showed me, standing there, looking terrified. But in the background of the photo, standing right where I had been a moment ago, was a figure. A man in a patient's gown, his skin a sickly, translucent gray. He was crouched on all fours, like an animal. I stopped dead. I looked at the end of the hall. Nothing. I looked back. Nothing. But the Wi-Fi signal was getting stronger. My phone vibrated again and again. Buzz. 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 I didn't want to look, but the screen stayed lit. The photos were coming every 5 seconds now. It was like a stop-motion film of my own death. Photo 1. The man is crawling toward me. Photo 2. He's on the wall, defying gravity, moving like a spider. Photo 3. He's on the ceiling, directly above my head. I felt a drop of something cold and thick hit the top of my hand. I didn't look up. I knew if I looked up, I'd see him. I bolted. I didn't care about my gear or the logbook. I ran for the stairwell, my phone still buzzing in my pocket like a panicked heart. I didn't stop until I burst through the emergency exit into the cool night air of the parking lot. I sat in my car and finally pulled my phone out. I had 42 new photos. I scrolled to the last one. It was a close-up. So close, all I could see was a patch of gray wrinkled skin and a single clouded eye. At the bottom of the screen, a text notification appeared from the same unknown sender. "Signal lost. Please return to room 413. I never went back. I sent a text to my boss saying I had a family emergency and I was moving out of state. I heard they checked the cameras. They said the footage just showed me running through empty halls, screaming at nothing. But I still have those photos on an old cloud drive. I don't look at them. Because sometimes, when my home Wi-Fi acts up and the signal drops, I see a new network pop up for just a second. It's always called Room 413, and it's always at full bars. My job was simple. Sit in the booth, watch the monitors, do a patrol every 3 hours, and most importantly, keep the logbook, a thick blue binder where you had to record every movement, time, name, purpose of visit. At night, there were no visitors. That was a strict rule. The first night was quiet, too quiet. On the second night, I nodded off at my desk. You know that light sleep where you can still hear everything? At 1:15 a.m., I heard the heavy thud of the front door. I bolted upright. I checked the monitors. The lobby was empty. Outside the entrance, nothing but moonlight. Just the wind, I told myself. Then I looked down at the logbook, sitting right in front of me. That's when the cold chill started at the base of my spine. In the 1:15 a.m. slot, there was an entry. The ink was fresh, still glistening under the fluorescent light. It was in my handwriting. I'd know those messy V's and S's anywhere. It read, Visitor, Room 302. Purpose, Evaluation. I stared at my hands. I hadn't moved. I hadn't touched my pen. But the ink was right there. I blamed it on exhaustion. I thought, maybe I'm sleepwalking? Maybe my brain glitched and I wrote it on autopilot? I crossed it out and sat there the rest of the night, gripping my coffee mug until my knuckles turned white. On the third night, I was ready. I propped my phone up to record the logbook and myself. I wasn't going to blink, let alone sleep. 1:15 a.m. came. Nothing. No door, no sound. I started to relax, thinking I'd imagined the whole thing. Then, a sound came through the radio on my shoulder. It wasn't a voice. It was the sound of a pen scratching on paper, right in my ear. I looked at the logbook. It was closed, but when I flipped it open, oh, there it was again. The same page. Visitor, Room 302. Condition, critical. The handwriting was wider now, frantic, like I'd written it while shaking. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the third floor. I had to prove to myself that no one was there. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and something else, something sweet, like rotting flowers. I stopped at room 302. The door handle was depressed. Someone was slowly, steadily pushing it down from the inside. I yelled, "Who's in there?" The movement stopped. The handle slowly returned to its place. I lunged forward and threw the door open. Empty. The room was stripped, the bed made. But on the pillow, there was a deep indentation, as if someone had just lifted their head off it. I ran back to my desk, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. I needed to see the recording. On the video, I'm sitting perfectly still, staring at the monitors. But the pen just stands up on its own. It dances across the page for a few seconds, then carefully lays itself back down. And in that moment, in the reflection of the dark window behind me, a white shape flickers. Not a person. Just a tall, impossibly thin figure in a vintage lab coat. No face. It was just standing there, watching me sleep. I didn't wait for the morning shift. At 6 a.m., the day nurse arrived. She glanced at the logbook and said casually, "Oh, 302 again? Strange. The old man in that room passed away yesterday at 1:15 a.m. I guess the old doctor came to fetch him." "What doctor?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Oh, a physician from the 70s. He was very dedicated. They say he still does his rounds if a patient is lingering." I sat in my car for an hour until my heart stopped racing. I only told this to one person, the guy who replaced me. He laughed. 2 days later, I saw his "Work Wanted" ad on a local board. In the reason for leaving column, he left it blank. Hospital night shifts are built on one thing: boredom. I was working as a sitter, basically a human alarm system. My job was to sit in a wooden chair outside room 212 and watch the patient through a small observation window. The patient was Mrs. Gable. She was 84, frail, and in a deep, medically induced sleep. The rules were simple. Don't let her fall, don't let her pull her tubes, and call the nurses if anything changes. The hallway was dimly lit with those flickering pale blue LEDs. I had my coffee, my phone, and a direct view through the thick, reinforced glass of the room's door. The glass was old and had a slight tint to it, acting like a dark mirror against the bright lights of the hallway behind me. Around 3 a.m., My eyes started to play tricks. I was staring at Mrs. Gable's reflection in the glass. In the bed, she was perfectly still, just a small mound under white sheets. But in the reflection, she was sitting up. I froze. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes until they burned. I looked directly through the glass at the bed. She was still lying down. I looked back at the reflection. In the mirror image, she was not only sitting up, she was looking right at me. Her reflected eyes were wide, milky with cataracts, and focused directly on my chair. I told myself it was ghosting. You know, when light reflects off the double-pane glass and creates a delayed image? Or maybe it was just a smudge on the glass reflecting the light from the nurse's station down the hall. It's 3 a.m. Your brain is filling in the blanks. But then the reflection moved again. In the glass, the reflected Mrs. Gable slowly swung her legs over the side of the bed. She stood up. I looked at the actual bed. It was empty. For a second, my heart stopped. I thought she had actually gotten up and I had missed it. I lunged for the door handle, but then I stopped. I looked again. The real bed wasn't empty. Mrs. Gable was still there, lying flat, her chest barely moving. But in the reflection, she was walking toward the door, toward me. She stopped at the glass. In the reflection, her face was inches from mine. I could see the fine lines in her skin, the way her gown hung off her shoulders. She looked younger, more vibrant. She leaned in and whispered something. I couldn't hear it through the glass, but I saw her lips move. "Thank you for staying." Then the reflection turned and walked out of the room, not through the door, but through the reflected wall, disappearing into the darkness of the hallway behind me. I didn't call a code. I sat there, trembling, staring at the perfectly still woman in the bed. I convinced myself I'd had a microsleep, a dream that lasted 3 seconds. I told myself it was just the light. I'm fine. I finished my shift at 7 a.m. As I was signing out at the nurse's station, I saw the morning crew rushing toward room 212. My stomach dropped. "What happened?" I asked a nurse. I knew. She looked at her clipboard, sighing. "Mrs. Gable, she just passed. Her heart just stopped. It's strange, though." "What's strange?" "The monitor says she flatlined at exactly 3:15 a.m. But when the night nurse did her rounds at 4, she swore the woman looked fine. Even seemed like she was breathing easier than before." I didn't tell her that at 3:15 I had watched Mrs. Gable walk out of that room. I didn't tell her that she died under my watch, and I was too busy convincing myself I was just tired to notice she was gone. I walked out of that hospital and never picked up another sitter shift. Working IT in a hospital is 90% fighting with printers and 10% wondering why the building's wiring was installed by someone who clearly hated their life. Around 2:45 a.m., I was staring at the live bed map, a digital layout of the hospital that shows which beds are occupied and what the patient's vitals are. I noticed a flickering icon in room 505. It was blinking red, indicating a critical heart rate, 160 beats per minute. I checked the census. Room 505 was listed as empty pending cleaning. There shouldn't have been a patient in there, let alone one with a heart rate like they were running a marathon. "Stupid crosstalk," I muttered. "It's a common glitch. The wires in the wall get damp or touch, and the signal from the patient in 504 bleeds into the empty port of 505. I grabbed my toolkit and headed to the 5th floor. The wing was silent, that heavy hospital silence where even your own breathing feels too loud. I walked into room 505. It was exactly as the log said, empty. The bed was stripped to the plastic mattress, and the cleaning cart was parked in the corner. But the bedside monitor was alive. The screen was glowing a sickly green in the dark. The EKG line was jagged, jumping across the display like a frantic animal. A heart rate of 162. All right, let's see which cable is the problem, I said out loud, just to hear a human voice. I reached behind the monitor and unplugged the data lead. The line on the screen didn't flatline. It kept jumping. 165. 168. Static charge, I told myself. The capacitor is just holding a residual signal. I was annoyed. I just wanted to go back to my desk and finish my shift. I pressed the hard reset button on the console. The screen went black. Then it flickered back on. Patient name? Unknown. Status? Agony. I stared at those words. My brain refused to process them. Software error, I whispered. The system is corrupted. Someone is messing with the database. I reached for the main power cord and yanked it out of the wall socket. The monitor didn't lose power. It stayed on. The heart rate jumped to 180. The beeping became a continuous, high-pitched scream. I looked at the empty bed. The plastic mattress cover started to indent, slowly, as if someone very heavy, was lying down on it. The sensors under the mattress, the ones that detect patient weight, started to trigger. 45 kilograms, 60 kilograms, 80 kilograms. The bed frame groaned under the invisible weight. I stood there, frozen, clutching the power cord in my hand. I told myself it was a hydraulic leak in the bed. I told myself the monitor had a backup battery I didn't know about. I was desperate for a logical explanation. I slapped the side of the monitor hard, just to make it stop screaming. The screen cracked. The heart rate on the display plummeted. 100, 60, 20. And then the flat line. I didn't run out. I'm an engineer. I like things to make sense. I stayed there until the monitor finally went dark. I wrote it off as a massive electrical surge that fried the unit. I even felt a bit proud that I fixed the glitch by breaking the hardware. I went home, slept for 8 hours, and forgot about it until I came in for my next shift. My supervisor was sitting at my desk. He looked pale. "Sam, did you go into 505 last night?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "The monitor was glitching. I think the motherboard fried. I had to knock it out." He turned the monitor around. It was sitting on my desk. It was just a hollow plastic casing. "Sam," he said, his voice trembling, "this is a demo unit. We put it in 505 yesterday to show the board of directors the new screen layout. There are no wires inside this thing. No battery, no motherboard. It's just a plastic shell with a sticker on the front." I looked at the monitor. He was right. It was an empty box. But the screen, the plastic sticker, was cracked right where I had slapped it. I used to work the night desk at the oncology records department. It wasn't in the main hospital. It was in an annex building connected by a long, glass-walled bridge. At 3 a.m., that bridge felt like it was miles long. My job was purely administrative. I processed discharge papers and filed lab results that came in overnight. It was the kind of job where you could go 6 hours without seeing another human being. The only sound was the occasional thump of the pneumatic tube system, those little plastic canisters that travel through pipes in the walls to deliver blood samples or paperwork. In the annex, the tube system was supposed to be deactivated at midnight. There was no one in the labs to send anything, and no one at my desk to receive it. But every night, around 3:15 a.m., I'd hear it. The first time it happened, I thought a day shift worker had left a canister in the line, and the air pressure finally pushed it through. I opened the station, took out the plastic tube, and looked inside. There was nothing but a small yellowed scrap of paper. It wasn't a modern lab form. It was a handwritten note on a memo pad that said, "Patient in 402 needs more ice." Room 402 was upstairs, but that floor had been converted into a storage unit 10 years ago. It was filled with broken beds and old monitors. I threw the note away and went back to my spreadsheets. The next night, at exactly 3:15 a.m., I opened the canister. Another note. Same handwriting. 402 is complaining about the draft. Close the window. I started feeling a bit uneasy. I called the main security desk. I asked them if anyone was playing pranks in the tube room. The guard sounded bored. Kid, the tube blowers for the annex are on a timer. They shut off at 12:05. It's physically impossible for anything to move through those pipes. On the third night, I decided to go upstairs. I told myself I was just checking for a draft. I took my flashlight and walked up to the dark, dusty fourth floor. It was freezing. Rows of old hospital beds were pushed against the walls, covered in plastic sheets that looked like ghosts in the dark. I found room 402. The door was stuck, but I managed to shoulder it open. The room was empty. No bed, no equipment, just a bare window and a radiator. But on the floor, right in the center of the room, was a small pile of ice cubes. They were fresh. They hadn't even started to melt yet. I stood there, staring at that pile of ice in a room that had been locked for years. My radio chirped. It was the security guard from the main building. "Hey," he said, his voice crackling. "I'm looking at the logs. Someone just sent a canister from the fourth floor station to your desk. Did you find someone up there?" I looked at the tube station on the wall of room 402. The send light was glowing a soft, ghostly green. I didn't wait to see if it would turn off. I ran back downstairs. When I got to my desk, the canister was waiting for me in the tray. It was vibrating slightly from the residual air pressure. I didn't want to open it, but I couldn't help myself. I flipped the latch. Inside was a final note. It didn't ask for ice. It didn't mention a draft. It just said, "Thank you for checking. It's much warmer now." I looked up the history of that wing later. In the 1990s, there was a nurse who was famous for never sitting down. She was obsessed with patient comfort. She died of a stroke during a double shift in the winter of '94. Her station? Room 402. I don't mind ghosts that scream or rattle chains, but a ghost that's still just doing its job? That's what haunts me. It makes me wonder if when we die, we ever really get to clock out. Have you ever been so tired that your eyes stop focusing? I was on my 24th hour of a double shift at Street Jude's. The basement laundry room is a world of its own. No windows, just the smell of bleach and the roar of machines. When you're that sleep-deprived, your brain starts playing tricks. It's called the hum. You start hearing songs in the white noise of the dryers. You think you see someone standing in your peripheral vision, but when you turn, it's just a pile of sheets. I kept telling myself, 6 more hours, then I can sleep. Just 6 more hours. Around 3 a.m., the tricks got specific. I was folding a stack of surgical gowns when I heard the heavy rolling of a metal laundry cart behind me. I didn't even look up. "Hey, Mike," I said, thinking it was the floor supervisor. "A bit late for a pickup, isn't it?" No answer. Just the sound of the cart stopping right behind my back. I felt the slight draft of air as it settled. I turned around to complain about the silence, but the aisle was empty. The cart was still 20 feet away, locked against the wall. "God, I'm losing it," I whispered. I rubbed my eyes until I saw stars. I blamed the echo of the basement. Large rooms do that, right? They trap sounds. I went back to the folding table. Then I heard a voice. It was my boss's voice, clear as a bell, coming from the steam tunnel. "Hey, we missed a load in 4B. Get moving." I sighed, grabbed my clipboard, and walked toward the tunnel. I was so tired, I didn't even realize the boss had been on vacation for a week. I entered the steam tunnel. The heat was suffocating. I saw a figure at the far end, shrouded in the mist, pushing a cart. It looked exactly like me. Same uniform, same slumped shoulders. I stopped. My heart gave a slow, sickly thud. "Hey!" I yelled. The figure stopped. It didn't turn around. It just stood there, in the steam. I started walking toward it. my anger fighting my fear. Who is that? Is this a joke? As I got closer, the sound of the machines behind me suddenly changed. All 10 industrial dryers, which had been roaring seconds ago, clicked off at the exact same time. The silence was deafening. It hit me like a physical wall. I looked back at the machines. They were dark. No lights, no heat. Then I looked back at the figure in the tunnel. It was gone, but the cart was there. I walked up to it, my hands shaking. The cart was filled with wet, red-stained linens. They were steaming, but when I touched them, they were ice cold. I looked at the floor. There were wet footprints leading away from the cart, but they didn't go toward the exit. They led straight into the concrete wall. I didn't run. I couldn't. My legs felt like lead. I just walked back to the security desk at the elevators. The guard was drinking coffee, looking at the silent monitors. "Rough night?" he asked. "Yeah," I croaked. "The machines. Did the power go out?" They all stopped at once. The guard looked at me, confused. "What are you talking about? Those machines have been locked out for maintenance since yesterday. They haven't been turned on all night." I looked through the glass window back into the laundry. It was pitch black. No steam, no noise, just rows of dead metal. "But I've been folding. I've been hearing them for hours." The guard shook his head. "Sleep deprivation is a hell of a drug, man. Go home." I wanted to believe him. I really did. I told myself my brain had just invented the noise to fill the silence. I went to the locker room to get my jacket. But when I opened my locker, I found something that made me freeze. In my pocket was a small scrap of paper I didn't remember picking up. It was a maintenance tag from one of the dryers. On the back, in my own handwriting, it said, "Don't stop folding. If you stop, he'll know you're awake." I didn't go back for my next shift. I told them I had a nervous breakdown from overwork. It sounds better than the truth that I was working a shift with something that wasn't there, and it was helping me finish the job.